It's October, and October is about a whole lot more than just pumpkins and fall color. It is a great opportunity to look out your window and not at your screen and watch all the visitors come to your yard. Those visitors are birds. It is bird time right now, and this is the start of migration season. In this series, we're going to be talking about a number of ways, from plants to feeders, on how you can attract birds to your property and have something to look at out your window all season long from fall to winter. So we've already talked about how fall is a great time for planting, and it certainly is, especially for your trees and shrubs, but there are also plenty of perennials that you can put in the fall or that you can use to plan for your next seasons. So we're going to cover right now some trees, shrubs, and perennials that you can add to your landscape that are guaranteed to attract our feathered friends. So with our perennials, you want to choose perennials that are late blooming. Why? For our pollinator friends that we've talked about before, but many of these late blooming perennials also provide seed for birds. Particularly, the ones that we know most about are going to be our black-eyed Susans and our coneflowers. Once these blooms fade, you are left with a seed head that are going to attract your finches. You're going to have purple and gold finches for sure in your backyard, nibbling all the seeds right off these seed heads. Next thing we're going to go to is the asters. Asters, and we have goldenrod. Asters and goldenrod are the pollinator powerhouses of the fall. They too leave behind plenty of seeds for our migrating birds, because once these beautiful flowers fade, the birds will be hanging off of them, eating all the seeds that they have. Finally, we have the coreopsis, or tick seed, which is another great one to have because the birds love to pick at the seeds after those flowers fade as well. Now, those are the flowers that we have in our landscape. The next perennials that you're going to want to think about are our grasses. Grasses are a wonderful way to add movement and texture to your garden, but even more so, they provide ample seed for our feathered friends. So here we have prairie drop seed, which is a wonderful lower growing grass that you can have in your landscape. It's going to create a great mound within your perennial beds. And then over here, which we have is a sea oats, and you can see the seed heads right there on that. Birds are going to come down and eat that. This will do well in the sun, but it also does well in the shade and has great fall color as it begins to fade. And then finally up here for grasses, we have our switchgrass, and you can see the seed heads right on there. So these are providing 3 different levels because they all grow at different heights. So we have 3 different heights of 3 different seed sources for those migrating birds. So by just thinking of seed heads with our flowers that we have between the asters, the goldenrod, the coneflower, and the black-eyed Susan, as well as the coreopsis, we're thinking seed heads, and then we're also thinking seed heads when it comes to our grasses. But this is what those migrating birds are going to be looking for as they fly over your house. So while most of these are fall blooming, especially the goldenrod and the asters, some of them start blooming in the summer and will carry into the fall, like the black-eyed Susan and the coneflower. These are not necessarily all plants that you want to put into one bed, because then you will have a fall-heavy or autumn-heavy flowering bed. But they certainly should be incorporated into your bed and into the landscape, especially when you're looking at succession planting. So when you want to have blooms going from early May all the way until October, these are the definite plants that you want to consider to have that long blooming perennial bed that we're all looking for. And not to mention, everything that we've just talked about and everything that we've just mentioned are all native plants, which makes them that much better for our migrating birds. And that's how they know to look for these, because they've evolved right alongside these and they know exactly where to go in the fall to find their seed. I will always advocate that you bring your bird feeders in the spring, because as we've talked about with native plants are host to many caterpillars. In the spring, those birds are looking for protein. They're looking for protein to feed their young. So we want them to be finding caterpillars, and we want to plant plants, especially native plants, that will attract and host those caterpillars so that the birds can find them and feed their young. As long as you're supplying a food source for your birds, you will have more birds in your backyard. Now, once we get into fall, the birds are no longer raising their young. They're either making a long journey in their migration, or they're trying to overwinter in your backyard. And this is where seed comes in, and this is why fall seed is so important in the landscape, because the seeds are little fat cells that the birds need to keep up their warmth, to keep up their energy. So in the fall, that's why we turn to seed. This is when you bring your feeders out, and this is why you need the plants we have right here, because we have seed and we have berries, and all of those are fat sources for the birds to fuel them either to stay warm and get through our winter or make it on their long journey. Okay, so we've covered our perennials. Now we're going to get into trees and shrubs. Now I don't have any trees to show you, but I will let you know right now that oak trees are exactly what you want to be planting for sure, as well as our conifers. So any nut tree, any pine trees, or any evergreen that has a cone is also a wonderful food source for our birds. Now when we get into shrubs and into the landscape, let me cover some of my favorites and some surefire ways to attract those visitors to your yard. So we'll start with the Amelanchier canadensis, or serviceberry. Now right now in fall, it doesn't actually have its berries, it has its fall display. You want this because in June it is covered with berries and is a great way to be attracting those birds. Also, for attracting birds more in the summer months and then has wonderful fall color is the chokeberry, or the aronia. This is definitely another wonderful shrub, varying sizes, but it usually gets to be about 6 feet tall. Great attractant, great pollinator plant. So these are both great pollinator plants. These both have summer berries, but again, we want those birds to know to come to our backyard. We definitely want to have those. Now moving into fall berries, we get into our viburnum. And this is definitely one of the shrubs that you want to have. We have that spring flower, you have that summer into fall berry, as you can see here, and you have amazing fall color. So like this is a landscape powerhouse, triple threat, if you could ever plant one, for sure. And then finally down here, we have our winterberries. Now the winterberries are going to hold their berries far into winter. They are not the first choice of our feathered friends, but when things get lean, that's when they start picking at these. So what we're definitely looking for, if you just put your feeder out in fall, and you've never had any of these plants within your landscape, those birds aren't going to know to come to your yard. So your yard will be the last one that they find. So the key is to have these plants in your yard, in your landscape, year round. So that's why we want to start feeding the birds with the serviceberry and the aronia in the summertime, because they will find those berries there and they're going to know that your yard is a wonderful buffet to come to, and that will lead them to your yard in the fall for the seeds of the perennials that we talked about and for the berries of these shrubs that we've talked about. And then if you have your feeder out, you are going to enhance the experience tenfold. So with these additions to your landscape, who can you expect? Well, we already talked about seeing the finches, the purple and gold finches on the coneflower, and that's for sure. You can also expect our overwintering birds like the chickadees, and you can expect cardinals, because they will all come and visit these plants for sure. Now when you have your oak trees and your conifers, you can expect birds like blue jays. Now a fun fact about blue jays, if you happen to be looking out your window and watching a blue jay, if a blue jay, say, has an acorn in its mouth, it wants to take that acorn and it wants to bury it somewhere so it can find it for later. If the blue jay knows you are watching it, it will fake plant or fake bury that acorn in the ground and then take off with it to kind of mislead you, thinking that that's where you're going to find that acorn. Blue jays are extremely smart and they're a lot of fun to watch. A lot of people don't really love them because of their call, and they think that they're bullies at the bird feeder. But if you actually start watching a blue jay, they are very interesting and very fascinating birds to watch. So now we've just covered how we can attract more birds to our landscape using our landscape plants and using our plantings. Stay tuned for the next one, and we are going to talk about bird seed, bird feeders, suet, and the like, so we can attract even more of those feather friends and support them through the winter. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Check out the newsletter and subscribe to the newsletter at westonnurseries.com, and I'm out.